Hello, I'm going to be talking about ancient Egypt, starting with their geography. Ancient Egypt's first 2,000 years of existence was a gradual process during the pre-dynastic period. It first started off, as you can see by this arrow, in the northeastern part of Africa. During this time of the pre-dynastic period, very little writing can be found, meaning there are very little records, so we don't really know what happened during that time. However, what we do know is that Egypt consisted of only a small amount of people living by the Nile River. These first people were attracted to Egypt because of the agricultural prosperity the Nile River gave. Once every year, the Nile River would flood, spreading the rich composition of soil it carries to the land, creating a great harvest for the people living there. Being that the climate is hot, dry desert air, with very little rain, it is easy to see why the Nile was considered their life source. The early people were farmers that harvested wheat, barley, figs, vegetables, and fruit. The most plentiful crop was grain, which was why they used it as money. This also meant that their economy depended on the Nile flooding. Speaking of the economy, it was considered a barter system, which means they traded goods and services for other goods and services. Here's a crash course video that goes over the whole history of ancient Egypt, but for the sake of time, I'm going to skip it. Talking about ancient Egypt's culture, the vast majority of people were farmers, peasants, or laborers. These were the most important because the entire economy depended on the farmers' harvest. The merchants who traded with farmers as well. They would go up and down the Nile with their trading goods. They would trade gold, papyrus, linen, and grain for cedarwood, ebony, copper, iron, ivory, and lapis lazuli. About any economy, almost anything could be traded with grain. You can get animals, clothes, materials, tools, etc. And gold and cedar were considered precious. Cedar is wood. Ancient Egypt's art has a massive amount of influence on Western art. Their massive usage of symbolism has been used in almost all art since then. The Egyptian painters would put symbols on walls, usually to tell a story. There are a lot of photographs today where we can see the art and the stories the Egyptian painters have left us. As we can see here, this is a nice painting of the sun god Ra. To show the usage of symbols of art, I found a random picture on the left and a chart of symbols on the right. You can take a few moments to see if you can find any symbols on the pictures any symbol on the picture to the left using the chart on the right. This chart only provides some of the vast symbols. So just by a quick glance, we have this thing that Ra's holding. You can see with the arc and the head. That's there. We have this. He's holding in his other hand. On the wall, we have the eye. Maybe there's some others in there too. But you can see there's a bunch of symbols in almost all paintings. Talking about the religion. Ancient Egypt believed heavily in religion and their gods. They were a polytheistic religion because they believed in many gods, unlike monotheism, which only believes in one. In fact, they believed in about 700 different gods and goddesses. Ancient Egypt's religion, the gods often took form of animals, as you can see here in this picture. We know this because of sculptures, paintings, and other monuments left behind from that time. The top 5 most worshipped gods are Amun-Ra. He was considered the king of the gods and goddesses. Mut, which means mother in Egypt. She was considered to give birth to all. Osiris, he was worshipped as the god of the afterlife. Anubis, who brought the souls to the Osiris in the afterlife. And then Bra, he is the sun god. Ancient Egypt's afterlife was a very big thing, and here I have split it up into 4 stages. Life on earth was seen only as one part of the eternal journey, and in order to continue that journey after death, one needed to live a life worthy of continuance. Now here I can explain what some of the previous job's duties were. So first, Anubis guides his souls to the Hall of Truths, where it'll wait in line for its turn. At the second stage, once at the front of the line, the soul will state 42 confessions from their life to the god Osiris amongst other gods. Then they will decide if these confessions were acceptable. If so, the soul can move forward. This part right here, not many people knew what happens. This is just one of the beliefs that happened after an afterlife. Then, after this stage, the heart would be weighed with the feather of truth. If it was lighter than the feather, it would pass. However, if the heart was heavier, it was eaten. The final stage, if the soul passed, they would enjoy eternal bliss with their favorite possessions and items. If not, they would be non-existent, which to the Egyptians is much worse than eternal suffering. Next, we talk about Egyptian social structure. It was a hierarchy, as you can see here in the image. We have a pyramid that shows their social structure. At the top, the most powerful was the pharaoh. He or she was believed to be a literal god on earth. Next were the nobles, who kept order and created law for the religion. Priests kept the gods happy by performing rituals and ceremonies. Soldiers were the defense of Egypt that were rewarded for their service heavily. Next, scribes were the only people that could read and write in the entire population. The merchants and craftsmen made up the middle class, and at the bottom were unskilled workers, farmers, and slaves. Here's a video where I got most of my information on Egypt's social structure from. The women of Egypt. Now, the society was dominated by men. The man was the head of the family, but women did have extensive rights. They could own and inherit property, they could participate in trade, they could even divorce their husbands and become the pharaoh. Next, the government. Here's a government, the structure Egypt used. I created one using a hierarchy chart. At the head of the government was the pharaoh, which people thought was a god, which made their government system Theoretic Monarchy. Theocratic monarchy is when the supreme ruler is a god. The pharaoh was the center of the government. He could arbitrate justice, he was the commander of the army, and he was the highest priest. The second most powerful people were called viziers. They kept civil order, collected taxes, and mobilized troops. Nomarchs ruled a small area of ancient Egypt, like current-day governors. As you can see on this chart, these were like some of the areas nomarchs ruled. Lastly, scribes, who made up less than 15% of the population, kept down records, wrote laws, and documents. Next, the writing system of ancient Egypt is known as hieroglyphs. These were little pictures seen in temples and tombs. Hieroglyphs is quite a complicated system where scribes have to memorize over 800 different meanings and then have to draw the pictures out. The scribes then made an easier writing system called hieratic. So on the chart here you can see hieroglyphs. You can see this picture of a bird versus the hieratic version of the hieroglyphics. Having an education, which meant you were a scribe, learning how to read and write, could help you become anything. In one story, one scribe became the pharaoh. So a little bit more about the geography in the map. Ancient Egypt is located in Africa. This is where Africa is on the map. And more specifically, ancient Egypt is located in the northeast hemisphere. It's in present day called Egypt. Most of the land is desert except for the rich soil near the Nile, which is the only major landmark. Now, here in this picture, we are shown the trade routes in red. There were also sea trade routes near the Red Sea where merchants would go up and down in boats. On land, merchants would use donkeys, horses, and then later domesticated camels to bring their goods along. Lastly, we're talking about the most important pharaoh, Ramses II. He lived a whopping 90 years, which outlived many of his children. He had about 200 wives and 100 plus kids, which is actually pretty... no comment on that, actually. Ramses II had more temples built than any other Egyptian king, as well as many other buildings throughout the land, and you can still see them today if you visit Egypt. As for the military achievements, Ramses II marched with 20,000 men to attack the Hittites. Not only did Egypt suffer defeat, he had to be saved by someone to return home. But once he got home, he told the scribes that he won by himself. This may seem like he hasn't really done anything, but later on he managed to create a peace treaty between the Hittites and Egypt, and this alliance led to an era of prosperity. This was the main reason why he's so important. Thank you.